Whenever you're struggling with art, use this. Hey, this is Brookes with Character Design Forge, a little bit under the weather this week, so sorry if there's any kind of nasal distortion. Sometimes you might be going through art block or some kind of struggle with your art. And while there is a certain amount of struggle that's sort of always going to be in there, as you make decisions and grow artistically, there's times when you just feel sort of stuck or like you're spinning your wheels. So I wanted to share with you the list that I go through every time I'm dealing with something similar. And hopefully, by modifying it a little bit to suit your own situation, you'll be able to use the same, because sometimes, especially as a professional artist, you can't afford to spin your wheels. The first few questions I ask myself here may seem super basic, but at least for me, there's a lot of times when I need to remind myself, oh, I haven't drank any water in a few hours, things like that. So the basis for these first few questions is something that came up a lot at the school that I used to teach at. They were very keen on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is an interesting concept, and it's something that I think Maslow actually kind of went back on later in life. But the general idea, with some universal truth to it, is that you have to have certain basic needs met before you ascend to things that are more advanced. So for example, for the students I was teaching, it'd be hard for them to learn if they hadn't gotten any sleep, or if they feel like their life is being threatened, which makes a lot of sense. And even at a societal level, artwork and the funding of artists is an advanced stage of a civilization, if you think about it. You can't spend money and people and resources on culture and the arts before you have food, shelter, and all those basics covered. And so for you creating this stuff, give yourself enough credit to realize that to make stuff not on autopilot, to make creative decisions and execute them well, you've got to take care of yourself. So the first few tiers of that hierarchy are physiological needs and safety. So we'll go through these really quickly. My first few questions on this list are 1, have you had enough rest? 2, have you eaten enough? 3, have you drank enough water? 4, have you taken any supplements or medication that you need to? For me, there's just a few vitamins that I feel lead to a more focused and healthy brain. For you, it may be different. I am not a qualified medical professional. Don't take any medical advice from me. Number 5, have you had enough exercise? Exercise does a lot to clear out some of that brain fog or complacency that you may feel sometimes. Number 6, are you warm enough? Are you wearing socks? Sounds stupid, but there's a lot of heat leaving your toes, especially in Connecticut in the winter. Conversely, are you cool enough? You know you are. Number 7, do you have good posture or working position? For me, I've realized that sort of leaning back, recline drawing, like say on a couch, sometimes isn't going to be as good as when I'm leaning a little bit more forward at a drafting table type of an angle, and my arm has a good free range of motion. And if you're trying to draw in a moving car, it's going to be tough if you're going over bumps, which again sounds super simple, but I started to convince myself that I couldn't draw anymore as a passenger on a long car ride a little while ago, until we were actually stopped and I realized, oh, that was really bumpy. So that mainly covers that physiological component. A happy body is a body that's happy to make art, and conversely, a hungry body is a hangry body. Question 8. You good? Like, hey. Are you good? And if you're not, question 9 is what's bothering you? And I know these still sound super basic, trust me, they get a little more specialized toward art. But this is kind of a big deal. The common rhetoric is that pain fuels art. But like if you're preoccupied with a problem with a friend or family member, or there's something looming over you, it can be really hard to be productive at all. However this needs to be resolved, work something out with the person, deal with the situation, or just take a short break to kind of clear your head. Doing this is really valuable. Don't discount the good that a short break can do for you. Now we get into some things that are really more specific to the craft of creating art. Number 10, are you warmed up? Now, anytime I sit down to draw, I should be warming up first with a series of exercises or a study of someone else's work or even some loose work. And it's kind of like fitness. If you just break out in a full-on sprint, or you try to lift your personal best from nothing without stretching or warming up, you won't perform at your best. Number 11, is your tank low? This is kind of related to being warmed up, but it's more along the lines of burnout. So something that I find a lot of times is that if I'm tight on time and the only stuff that I'm making is work that's for a client or that I'm making specifically to show publicly, like art for this channel or something, and I haven't taken the time to make something for myself, for fun, that's experimental, that I'm not worried about what other people will think, that I tend to get a little stretched out and my work isn't as good. So it's important to have that creative junk drawer, as I've called it before. Related to that, number 12, are you expecting perfection from yourself? Could you create something almost exactly as good with maybe 80% of your best effort, if that makes sense, and not really lose anything? That way you can finish, which is always better than agonizing over something until it's perfect, because it possibly never will be perfect. Number 13, are you putting any needless constraints on yourself or forcing yourself to not work optimally? And I'll give you an example of this to explain it a little bit better. A few weeks ago, someone commissioned me to draw their character. Now, this person is someone who's a great artist in their own right, and as I was doing this work, I had built up a few things in my head. I thought, well, this artist is really good, they do work for Disney, they know their character really well. I need to now draw their character the way that they would. I need to approach it the way that they did. Now, if I was doing a study of this person's work, this might have been a good idea, but since they had hired me to make art, and it wasn't like an art test where I was supposed to match their style, they had hired me to make this character the way that I would make it. So that sounds simple, but it's something that I ended up spinning my wheels on a lot, until I realized, don't force yourself to do it the way they would, do it the way that you would. The same for any situation where someone hires you to make something that looks like your other work. Don't overcomplicate it. Number 14, is the thing that you're struggling with something that you don't understand? For example, are you drawing a leg or an arm and you don't really understand how those work? So it's a good idea here to isolate that thing that you're struggling with and study it. Sort of a divide and conquer thing. Sometimes when we're sitting there struggling, we overwhelm ourselves by saying that it's the whole art that we're having a problem with. But when you parse down what problem it is that you have, it can be a lot more manageable. Number 15. Are you using the right process, or at least the one that you've had the most success with for this kind of work in the past? Are you trying to approach a comic the way that you would a painting, or character concept work the way that you would an animation? Sometimes that's an easy thing to trip yourself up with. Now, these next two questions are almost always valuable with a piece of art. Number 16, have you flipped your image or looked at it in a mirror or held it up to the light backwards? This is a great way to get fresh eyes on your work and make changes accordingly. And number 17, how are your values? No matter what color you're using, most art, when converted to black and white or grayscale, will help you see what areas are drawing the eye, which pieces are blending together or a little murky, or what has good contrast. When art is broken down this way, it typically becomes a series of basic shapes, and we do well to apply those Gestalt principles of design to them, and some of the fundamental principles of character design, which I've talked about before. All of these questions are useful to keep on hand, and if in your experience there's a reminder that you feel it'd be good to include, customize the list and use it yourself. So often the battle with art is a mental one, and we psych ourselves out and make things difficult for ourselves. And reminding ourselves that our problems might be something that we've dealt with before, that come with solutions, might make the battle much easier to fight. Knowing is half the battle.
Bottom massage.
G.I. Joe!
For a little while now, we've been posting at 11 a.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, but from here on out, we're going to try 4 p.m. Eastern, because that's apparently a better time to post according to YouTube. It's been pretty defeating when you put all kinds of work into a video and it barely makes a ripple, so anything that I can do to improve that, I'll try, and anything that you can do to help, I really appreciate. So liking, commenting, all of those typical things actually really do make a difference, and I appreciate everyone who's been doing that every week. That's it from me. My Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch are all Bagel Denizen. Thank you so much for watching, and have fun creating.